I used to think I was the luckiest man in the world. A beautiful wife, 2 sweet kids, and a home filled with laughter. But everything collapsed in a single night, when she looked at me with eyes as cold as ice and said, "Those 2 kids aren't yours." She even laughed, like I was some living joke. I thought I was dreaming, but no, it was real. And I made a plan she'd never see coming. My name is David Miller, 38 years old, a software engineer living in Austin, Texas. My story might sound like some cheap soap opera, but I swear to you, everything you're about to hear is true. Rachel and I met back in college. She studied graphic design, and I was in information technology. We fell in love after a study group session, when Rachel helped me hand draw a UI design I had been struggling with for a week. She had bright eyes, a warm smile, and a unique kind of confidence. We dated for 3 years before getting married. At the time, I had just landed a job at a major software company, and Rachel had started an online cosmetics store. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Those first days living together in a small apartment on the south side of the city were the best time of my life. Then Liam was born, a brown-eyed boy like his mom, with dimples like mine, or so I thought. 2 years later came Sophie, a tiny, cheerful girl who followed me around like my shadow. We moved to the suburbs, bought a house, planted trees, got a dog, and lived a life most people would call ideal. I worked from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., sometimes later. Rachel stayed home more, took care of the kids, ran her small online business, and occasionally met with clients. I trusted her completely, probably the biggest mistake of my life. About a year ago, I started sensing something off. Rachel was always busy, her phone always on silent, locked with Face ID. She didn't get excited when I came home anymore. Family dinners became rare, replaced by evenings where Rachel ate alone because she was tired, had a headache, or was working on orders. I thought, maybe she's just stressed. Maybe she needs a break. But then I started hearing giggles behind the bathroom door while she texted. Secretive, short phone calls. And one night, when I came home early unexpectedly, I found Rachel talking on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't know I was standing behind the wall. I heard her say, "Yeah, he has no clue. He thinks the kids are his. What an idiot." I froze. My blood rushed to my head. I didn't say anything that night. No yelling, no confronting. I just looked at my wife, the woman I had loved for 12 years, and felt like my heart was being crushed. 3 days later, I quietly took hair samples from the kids and sent them for a DNA test. The 2 weeks that followed felt like a century. The result, 0% biological relation. I printed the report, picked it up, then put it down. I repeated that a dozen times. Every time I looked at that number, my heart sank. When I finally confronted Rachel, she didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just laughed, a cold, distant laugh I'd never seen on the face of the woman I once called wife. "I'm serious," she said casually. "Did you really think you were good enough for me to have kids with? You're a mid-level engineer with a boring life, always coding or sleeping. You're a joke, David. And you should thank me for letting you live in that beautiful illusion all these years." I didn't say anything back. I just stood there, staring at the woman I had promised to love forever, and felt a storm rising inside me. I knew I couldn't let it end like this. She had stolen my youth, my trust, and the 2 children I had loved like my own. But I wasn't going to get revenge with anger or violence. No, I would wait. Wait for the most important day in her life, and destroy everything, in a way she could never see coming. I lost sleep for weeks after that. Not from heartbreak, but from thinking. I couldn't understand how a person could lie for so many years, look me in the eye every night, and still smile like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't afford to fall apart. If I broke down, she would win. And Rachel didn't deserve to win. I hired a lawyer, Benjamin Cole, who had represented a friend of mine in a tough divorce case. He was in his 50s, bald, always carried a small notebook, and had a habit of asking short, razor-sharp questions. After I laid out the whole story and handed him the DNA results, he just nodded and said, "We're not going to strike fast. We'll strike at the right time." I started gathering evidence quietly. Every time Rachel went to meet a client, I hired someone to follow her. There were no clients. Just Daniel, a well-groomed middle-aged man who drove a Lexus and worked at a bank branch in Houston. She usually dropped the kids off at her mother's place, then drove hours to see him. I knew Rachel was planning to file for divorce, but not to free me. She had everything set up, dividing assets in a way that favored her, hiding money in a secret account, and most importantly, she had no intention of ever telling me the kids weren't mine. If I hadn't done the DNA test on my own, I would have been paying child support for the next 15 years. When she finally filed for divorce, I pretended to be shocked, confused, even desperate. "What did I do wrong, Rachel? I can change, please." She looked at me like I was some pitiful child. "David, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You'll be fine. We just aren't right for each other anymore." Just like that. One light sentence to end over a decade of marriage. But I didn't react. I agreed to the divorce. I let her have the house. She wanted custody of the kids? I didn't object. Everything played out exactly the way she wanted. Rachel thought she had won. But that was just step one. Step two, I filed a separate lawsuit with my lawyer for financial fraud. Rachel and I had co-founded an online cosmetics store, but recently all the revenue had been funneled into her personal account. I had documents, receipts, even records of suspicious withdrawals. I didn't need to win the case, I just needed the court to see that she wasn't being honest. Then I filed for custody of the two kids, not based on biology, but on emotional grounds, proving the mother was unfit. Both children were attached to me, called me dad, and I could show that I'd raised them from birth. With Rachel's lies, infidelity, and financial misconduct, my chances weren't zero. But I still hadn't made my final move. I was waiting for the right moment. One day, I picked Sophie up from preschool. She ran to me, hugged me like always, and said, "Daddy, Mommy says she's going to marry Uncle Daniel. I have to call him new Dad." I smiled and nodded, but my heart twisted inside. Rachel and Daniel were getting married in the spring, at a fancy resort in Miami Beach. According to a close friend of hers, who, by chance, still liked me more than her, Rachel had planned a big wedding, pastor, over 100 guests, and even a live band. And I knew that was the moment. I told my lawyer, "We'll wait until the wedding day. I'll go there, not to congratulate them, but to end it all." I lost count of how many times I pictured that scene, Rachel's wedding day. Her in a white dress, smiling victoriously, holding Daniel's hand as they walked down the aisle. They thought it was all over, that I'd been tossed out of their lives like old garbage. But they had no idea, the battle wasn't over. I took an early flight to Miami, carrying a small suitcase, a clean-cut suit, and a thick file prepared by attorney Benjamin. Inside was everything: DNA test copies, infidelity evidence, bank statements, photos of Rachel and Daniel during their secret meetups while still married to me, and most importantly, a court subpoena related to the financial fraud case. I didn't go alone. Benjamin came with me, and we had coordinated with local Florida police to be ready to intervene if needed. The ceremony was held at a beachfront resort. Beautiful, extravagant, arrogant. I stood at a distance and watched Rachel glowing in her wedding dress, greeting guests, hugging everyone, with no clue what was about to happen. I waited until the ceremony began. That moment when they walked up the aisle, the pastor opened his book. Music played softly. Everyone's attention on the happy couple. That's when I walked forward. I moved down the aisle, slowly, steadily, no rush. Heads turned. Some recognized me, but no one reacted in time. Rachel froze. Her eyes widened as she saw me approach. Daniel turned, his face went pale. "David?" Rachel gasped, her voice almost choking. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer right away. I turned to the pastor, polite. Sorry to interrupt the ceremony, but I have a very good reason. I pulled the file from my briefcase and held it up. I have proof of infidelity, financial fraud, and a court subpoena. This woman, the one about to become your wife, Daniel, embezzled over $80,000 from the business we co-owned. She also hid the fact that the 2 children aren't mine, and violated custody and marriage laws in the state of Texas. Silence. I handed the file to the plainclothes officer with us, who immediately stepped forward and announced, Rachel Simmons, you are under arrest for financial fraud and violation of marital property laws. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used in court. No! No! This is a mistake! Rachel screamed, all pride gone. She struggled against the officer's grip and turned to Daniel. Say something! Don't let them take me! But Daniel backed away. He stood frozen, pale, and only managed to say one thing. I didn't know anything. No one came to her rescue. No one defended her. Every pair of eyes was on Rachel, the woman who once confidently believed she was the center of the universe. She was handcuffed and escorted out of the wedding, right in front of hundreds of family members, friends, and colleagues. Her white wedding dress dragged across the tiled floor, her face hidden behind messy hair and smeared tears. I stood there watching. Not with satisfaction. Not with pain. Just a sense of closure. As if the door that once slammed shut on my life had finally opened, so I could move forward, no longer chained to the past. After the police left, the ceremony dissolved into confusion and shame. I walked out of the resort without looking back. Attorney Benjamin patted me on the shoulder and said quietly, You did it, David. With dignity. A few days later, Rachel was held for investigation. Daniel refused to contact her and officially ended their relationship. As for me, I filed for custody of the 2 children. Not out of revenge, but because they needed a real father, not a liar. After the cancelled wedding and Rachel's arrest, I returned to Texas not with pride, but with a heavy heart. Not because I pitied her, but because I knew the real battle wasn't over. The 2 kids, Sophie and Ethan, were still with their grandmother. They didn't know what had happened. They still thought their mother was just away for a few days. They still didn't understand that the man they called every night, me, wasn't their biological father. And I had to decide, did I have the courage to keep being there, Dad? The answer came quickly, that very afternoon. I went to pick them up from school. Sophie ran to me, hugged me tightly, and said with her clear, innocent eyes, Daddy, Mommy hasn't called. Can you call her? I froze. Ethan stayed quiet, sitting in the back seat, gripping his backpack tightly. He didn't say a word. But in his eyes I saw confusion, fear, and hope. In that moment I understood. No matter what the DNA said, they were still my children. And I would fight for them with everything I had. Benjamin and I immediately filed for temporary custody, along with a petition for the court to consider that Rachel was currently unfit to be a mother. Even though she hadn't been convicted, the serious allegations, fraud, infidelity during marriage, financial manipulation, were enough for the court to reconsider the children's living situation. From jail, Rachel submitted an objection, hired a private attorney, and argued that I had no biological connection to the children, and therefore no legal grounds to claim custody. The court scheduled a 3-day hearing, where every secret would be revealed. On the first day, Rachel's team focused on legal technicalities. I wasn't the biological father. There was no formal adoption paperwork. I had no default rights after the divorce. I stayed silent, waiting for my turn. On the second day, Benjamin called me to the stand. He asked, David, over the past 9 years, what have you done for these 2 children? I told them. About the sleepless nights when Sophie had a high fever. About the time Ethan fell off his bike, and I carried him to the hospital. About the birthdays where I baked cakes myself, the ski trips, the camping, the bedtime stories, and the thousands of innocent questions I answered. And I ended with one sentence. I may not have created them, But if love and sacrifice are what make a father, then I have never fallen short. On the third day, I submitted proof that Rachel had planned to leave Texas with Daniel and take the children, something that would completely disrupt their schooling, stability, and emotional well-being. Her potential prison sentence was also brought up. Rachel's attorney couldn't deny it. The court began to lean in my favor. But what moved everyone the most was a handwritten letter from Sophie. I didn't know when she wrote it. Maybe her grandmother helped her send it. The letter was read aloud in court. I don't know who gave birth to me, but I know who holds me when I cry. I call him Dad because he's always there. I want to live with Dad. I love Dad. The courtroom fell silent. Rachel lowered her head. I had to turn away. My tears were already falling. A few days later, the court issued its ruling. David was granted temporary custody of the two children. The official custody case would be heard after the completion of the criminal investigation against Rachel. Rachel was prohibited from leaving the state and was not allowed to have unsupervised contact with the children. I didn't laugh, didn't cheer, didn't celebrate. I simply got back in the car, the two kids in the back seat, and as the engine started, Ethan whispered, "I knew you wouldn't leave us." I turned to them and nodded. "I'm not going anywhere. Never." After the court's decision, I officially brought the children home to the house they once called their safe haven. But this time, the house no longer echoed with the laughter of the woman I once loved, no more full family dinners, no sense of completeness. Everything had changed. The hardest part wasn't the laundry, the cooking, or the parenting. It was healing the invisible wounds inside those two young hearts. Sophie still had nightmares. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, tears streaming down her face, calling, "Mommy, Mommy, don't go." Ethan became quieter. The once curious, playful boy now sat silently for hours with his toy airplane, his eyes lost in another world. I knew it wasn't their fault. They were just victims. And I, though not their biological father, had to be the one to pull them out of that nightmare. I took them on a weekend camping trip. Nowhere far, just the same old park where we used to have family outings. I brought the old bike, the little tent, and memories I thought had long gone quiet. That night, under a sky full of stars, I told them, "I can't change the past. I can't erase what happened. But if you give me a chance, I'll rebuild everything. From the beginning. Right here." Sophie looked at me, eyes glistening. She asked softly, "Is Mommy coming back, Dad?" I paused for a few seconds, then answered truthfully, "I don't know. But if she does, I won't let either of you get hurt again." That was the first time, since the trial, I saw a softness return to Sophie's eyes. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I don't need Mommy to come back. I just need you." I also started taking the kids to a child psychologist once a week. At first, they were scared. But little by little, they began to open up. Ethan talked about nights when Mommy would lock herself in the room with Uncle Daniel, and Sophie shared how she'd seen her mom crying but never knew why. The psychologist told me, "The best thing you've done isn't just raising them, it's listening and staying patient. They can recover. And they need you." I no longer felt burdened. On the contrary, I felt proud. Meanwhile, the investigation into Rachel continued. I didn't pay much attention to the details. But one day, I received a priority mail envelope from a federal prison in Florida. A handwritten letter. From Rachel. "David, I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just want to say, I've lost everything. Daniel ran away, friends turned their backs, my family is ashamed of me. I sit here every day, thinking about what I did. About how I betrayed a good man, innocent children, and even myself. You have every right to hate me. But if you still think of me, please tell Sophie and Ethan. I'm sorry." I finished reading. No anger. No pity. Just a feeling of closure. I didn't reply to Rachel's letter. But that evening, I sat down with the kids and told them that their mom was far away. She made mistakes, and she's hurting too. But she loves them, in her own way. Ethan turned to me and asked, "So, can Mom come back?" I answered, "Maybe. But whether she does or not, you both still have Dad. And I'll always be here." I started journaling again, not to complain, but to document each step of our recovery as a family of 3. I posted a few lines on social media as a way to heal. Unexpectedly, many people related. There were men who had also been betrayed. Single mothers who said they cried reading our story. A friend told me, "David, you should share your story more widely. Not for pity, but so people know. Some fathers choose to love with their hearts, not just blood." I smiled. Maybe he was right. Now, our little home no longer feels gloomy. There's Sophie giggling while I teach her to bake. There's Ethan calling me outside to watch him play soccer. And there's soft music each night as I read to them before bed. I don't know what the future holds. But right now, I'm living. And I'm being a dad. Truly. Life after the trial and the past hardships slowly seeped into the moments of our everyday. I still try to find faith, even with wounds that haven't fully healed, but now I understand. Being a father means moving forward, not just for myself, but for the children I love dearly. After months of healing, I began writing those journal entries not only to preserve the sad memories but also to document the journey of healing, for myself and for anyone else going through tough times to know they're not alone. Those writings soon turned into a blog sharing my story, titled Dad Never Gives Up. On the blog, I wrote about the sleepless nights next to Sophie's bed when she had a fever, about the times Ethan cried missing his mom, about the small happy moments we shared over dinner, and even the loneliness of the midnight hours. Before long, my blog started gaining attention from the community. There were sympathetic comments, people writing to say they had gone through similar pain. My story was no longer a whisper in the dark but began to resonate with others who were hurting. One day, a well-known family psychology blogger reached out and invited me to a live talk show to share my story. On the day of the show, I sat in front of my computer, a little nervous but hopeful. On screen, warm lighting lit up my tired but sincere face. I spoke about the journey of overcoming pain, about learning to hear the soul's voice through my children, and how I gradually realized that happiness isn't just about shared blood, but about loving actions. My story touched many hearts, and I believe many families, many parents who had weathered storms in life. As audience questions poured in, I calmly responded, sharing my experiences and offering hope. Even when life turns its back on you, remember, you can always begin again. Live for those you love. Following the success of the talk show, I was invited to a radio program at a well-known station in Texas, where I had the chance to discuss with a psychologist and others with similar stories. The conversation focused on family love, sacrifice, and the meaning of fatherhood. I spoke about how I helped the children cope with the absence of their mother, and how I found strength through sharing my own emotional battles. Every word, every story shared, felt like a balm for those in pain. Just a few months later, my story spread not only on social media but also to publishers. A book compiling the stories from Dad Never Gives Up was proposed, to share experiences of overcoming marital breakdown. I was surprised when I received a publishing contract. Each chapter became a step forward in the healing journey, from the hard early days of caring for Sophie and Ethan to rising from the ashes of the past. During that time, I met Anna, a young, empathetic, and passionate journalist. She reached out to do a series of in-depth interviews about being a father after family trauma. What began as a simple exchange turned into long midnight talks and shared laughter, and I started to see something special in her. Anna wasn't just a professional reporter. She genuinely cared, listened, and understood. She shared with me her own struggles balancing work and family, and the loneliness behind the camera lights. We grew close, sharing long conversations about the values of love and moments of silent empathy. One time, as we walked through the park on a chilly evening, Anna stopped and looked into my eyes. "David, I see you not only as a brave father, but as a man who knows how to love wholeheartedly. I hope that on this journey, you'll find the happiness you truly deserve." Her words touched my soul. After months of wrestling with loss, I began to feel that besides sharing pain, I also needed to open my heart, to love and to be loved. Day by day, between press conferences and community events, I realized that life isn't just about what we lose, it's full of unexpected chances. The warmth from grateful readers, the solidarity from single moms, and Anna's quiet encouragement slowly made me believe in a new future, where pain is replaced by hope and love. Together with Anna, I organized a community gathering for single parents at a local cultural center. That night, in a warm and open atmosphere, I shared my story and experiences overcoming crisis. I emphasized, each of us can be a role model for our children, not because we share blood, but because we choose to love and care for every precious moment. The event ended in warm applause. I felt hope reborn, like seeds sprouting from the earth, carrying promises for the future. Among the crowd, Anna's eyes sparkled with pride and respect. I suddenly realized, maybe fate brought us together to give each other strength and joy. When the TV interview aired, the audience response was overwhelmingly warm. The phrase, "Dad never gives up," echoed far and wide, and I couldn't help but wonder whether I truly deserved that trust. But the answer came each day I lived. Sincerity, passion, and love are values no one can take away. I continue writing the blog, recording every step of our journey. Though new challenges come, I cherish every moment with Sophie and Ethan. Now, my heart is no longer weighed down by the past but open to the beauty ahead. Maybe life is always full of surprises. And through its ups and downs, I've found faith in my own story, faith to move forward, and faith in love, not only as a father, but as a man, with a woman named Anna, who gently changed the course of my life. David's story is living proof that blood doesn't define a father. Love, patience, and compassion are the strongest bonds of all. Despite betrayal and deep wounds, David chose to rise, to love 2 children not of his blood as his own, and through that, he found himself again. In real life, this story reminds us, sometimes, family isn't made from perfection, but from people who refuse to give up on each other, even in the darkest moments. What do you think about David's journey and his choices? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more moving stories about family, resilience, and forgiveness in life.